on the festival circuits with Generation Africa. I'm just going to introduce one who's here, Chinedum. Could you come out front? And then the rest of them will join via the link. And the head of Steps Africa and Generation, and the convener of Generation Africa, Don Atkins, he also runs AfriDocs, is also here with us online. So Don, I'm going to start with you because you kind of put this whole thing in motion. And can you tell us what kind of kicked off Generation Africa? Why did it start? And yeah, why are we here 3 years down the line? Volume, please.
We started because we wanted to give a voice to the youth in Africa. Having the largest youth population of the continent in the world, somehow we just don't seem to be hearing their voices. And so we thought that if we could start a documentary film project that would involve young filmmakers looking at youth futures on the continent, we could come up with some really interesting stories. And as we started developing it, the so-called migration crisis took place with people trying to reach Europe. And because a number of young people from Africa were involved in that, I thought it would be a good idea to combine the two and look at it through the lens of migration. Because what a lot of people don't understand in the world, migration in Africa takes place within the continent. And only a small portion of it is about leaving Africa. And so we put out the call for proposals and started a series of story development workshops, which Chinedum can also give you some information about.
Okay, thanks, Don. So I'll tell you how well we started. In 2018, there was a call, and it was for stories and pitches and concepts. Across Africa. So the central theme was around immigration, because the idea was Generation Africa and Steps, and with at Steps, they noticed that a lot of the conversations that were being had about Africa were not had by African filmmakers. And so the films about migration was told from a European lens, and so it was important for us to come and tell our individual stories. But what's interesting, I guess, to me is also around documentary filmmaking in general, and how we can attune it, and we can make it, and how we can really use it to tell stories. It's also, I mean, I wouldn't say it's easier, but it's more accessible, especially for documentary filmmakers on the continent with limited budgets. How do you tell a story using real life and real characters, and how that journey kind of came about? So Chinedum, how was, you've been a filmmaker as well, for a long time. You give us like a brief bio about you, but what was different about this process and this method? And you'd made documentary films before, but how was this different for you?
Hi guys, good afternoon everyone. So my name is Chinedum Irregular. I'm popularly known as Saint Maxi. Yeah, so I've been a filmmaker for quite a while, maybe a decade plus. And I was an NFI alumni. I'm an NFI alumni anyway, so yeah, I've done a lot of documentaries before. And in 2018, we have a call for entry for documentary, and documentary through migration. So I applied, and then I got a call back that okay, my documentary idea has been selected. And since 2018, I've been working on one particular project. It's somehow it's been hectic, because the process of making documentaries that is internationally acceptable is different from the process of just making a documentary. So it's been somehow a roller coaster. We go back and forth. We try to adjust stuff. I'm actually shooting in Nigeria and Mauritania. So I've went to to Mauritania twice trying to shoot this documentary. I've been in my location where I'm supposed to film here in Nigeria like 5 times. So in the process, what I should say about documentary is, first of all, is that you have to have an in-depth knowledge of your character. You have to have an in-depth knowledge. It's just like at the end of the day, you're trying to be the character, because without you being the character, there is no way you're going to understand the character. So you have to be, somehow, somewhat very, very close to the character, that they can be able to relate with you. They can be able to tell you all the truth that is available.
Well, thank you. I wanted to introduce another filmmaker. I think she's joined us, Fatima. The name of her film is Fati's Choice. And Fatima, thank you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, hello.
Hello, Fatima. She's joining us from Ghana. You're in Accra at the moment.
Yes.
Okay, so can you tell us about your film, actually? So let's start with the story. Who's your film about? What is just talk us through your film and your connection to your character.
Oh, okay. So first of all, let me say good afternoon for my end. Yeah.
Good afternoon.
So my film talks about, it's about a young woman who traveled to Europe by road, like she used the Sahara to get to Europe to join her husband, but she decided to come back, because of her children. So she abandoned her dream of getting the greener pastures in Europe, and then she decided to come back home. So my story is about the criticism that she faces for her decision to come back home. You understand me? So her community didn't really accept her for her decision. There was a lot of conflict, to the extent that she ended up getting divorced because the husband felt that she betrayed him in a way, so she got divorced, and at the end of the day has to fight back to get her children, which was the primary reason for her coming back. So, to shoot this documentary, there were a lot of, I needed to get very close to Fati. She's also called Fati. And I had to spend a lot of time, to build the trust, which wasn't easy, because in the beginning, she was finding it very difficult to open up. You understand me? There was a lot of trust issues because it's a very small community. So when I approached her, it was like everybody knows that there's somebody in the community. So she was contemplating, already there were a lot of criticisms about her. So she was kind of skeptical about her story going out, but it took a lot of patience to make her understand that her story is very, very important for people like her and to the world, and if she should share her story, it's going to be something very impactful, for people in Ghana and around the world. Yeah, so basically that is about the film and how I met my character.
How long did you film with her for the documentary?
So it took about, I started shooting her around 2017, 2018, so roughly about 2.5, 3 years. But before I introduced the camera, I think I spent about a year with her before I was able to introduce the camera, before she felt comfortable enough to be on camera.
Yeah, so I think it's this process that we really kind of want to talk about, the idea that it takes time. And because it's not something that it's scripted, it's something that, you have to kind of watch unfold, and having like that having to spend time to build trust, to get access to the right subject. That's like I guess that's the first step. I also am making a documentary as well, and it's a short film. And my initial story was really about an absentee wedding and the absentee marriage, because what happens with, so like I said, we're all making different films about immigration, but coming at it with our own lens, and for different stories completely. And the idea for me was, a lot of the times there are a lot of men who are not and have left the country, either in Dubai or in Europe or wherever they are, and they arrange marriages with women here in Nigeria, either through their families. And so you see sometimes like where there's a wedding and there's nobody, the man is not there. Because he can't make it down for his wedding. And I guess, but there's that element of how do you even start life when he's not present, and those are like the repercussions of the when there's this kind of like irregular immigration. Somebody can't come here because maybe he's still married in Europe. He can't, he doesn't have his papers, but he needs to start his family. And what's your film about? Business as usual, Trinidad.
Okay, yeah, my film is titled Business as Usual. It's about traveling to Europe, basically through the Mediterranean. It's what I was trying to do with the film is trying to juxtapose slave trade era and what is happening now. Because then, during the slave trade era, we all know that our ancestors were taken out of Africa, without them consenting to it. Now, we, the young ones, are in that quest of trying to go to Europe, with by all means necessary, by all means possible. We are trying to, get that that feel of we are in Europe and stuff like that, and thereby risking our lives. So those same risks that those our ancestors took, those years, it's what we are taking now, trying to go to Europe through the wrong way. So I'm just trying to highlight those issues, but I'm not going through the lens or through the eyes of the migrator, the person that is migrating. I'm trying to go to tell the story through the eyes of, then it's called slave merchants. Now it's called the fixers. So I'm trying to go through the eyes of the fixers now. Those who help you, you want to cross the desert, they'll tell you, okay, I'll help you to cross the desert. You want to cross the sea, I'll help you to cross the sea. I can take you there. But they're here. And they're not traveling out. So why are they not traveling out? If actually there is somewhat greener pastures there, why are they not going? So that is what my story is all about. I'm telling this story through their eyes. And somehow I was lucky to find one, and then I found a second one. The first one is good to me. We tried as much as possible to film everything possible. The second one is a bit dodgy. So sometimes he tells me this, and then I later find out that it's this. So it's a journey, just like the title,
So there are about 28 films as part of the collection, and all, there are 2 films in the festival now called Zinda. I think it's showing later today. Zinda is showing later today at 5:10, just FYI, so it doesn't skip me. So Dawn, sorry, it's weird to be talking to somebody that's behind you. I feel like I should. So Dawn, what was the putting this together? So the another interesting thing about this is like it's completely Pan-African, right? So we have filmmakers who are English speaking, French speaking, across different countries, and it's coming from one place. One company is packaging. The films that were already, Fati was talking about how she already knew her character, Fati, for 1 year, even before filming. So there were projects at different stages. For some, we had to come up with projects on the go. So Dawn, how was the process like in making, and it's truly, and another thing is the truly Pan-African projects, and what are the joys and challenges, in managing 28 projects across Africa, across languages, and all coming together to tell, with one theme?
Well described, Chioma, joys and challenges. One of our goals was and has been and still is to bring the Anglophone and Francophone film communities together through the project. Because we've never really done that on the continent, because there's a big colonial divide through different cultures and the influences of the colonial masters and their influences on so many countries and so many people. So one of the challenges has been to find a common cinematic language that we both can understand and exchange our views and look at it from different points of views as well. And by doing that, I think it brings us closer together. So the joy is helping build a community of filmmakers who are starting to get to know each other where they hadn't really had much contact before. So that's what I would say around that. Chioma, back to you.
The challenges. The joy, you said the joy was bringing all the filmmakers together, but from how does it work practically? Can you share it? Because there are filmmakers here who will go on to kind of make films that want to work with other filmmakers and raise funding for films. So could you give us some just like practicality of the project and how it's been run?
The films are all co-productions, so we're learning this co-production way of making a film together. So it's a co-production between Steps in South Africa and 25 different production countries in these 16 countries where the films are being made. Some of the films have a third co-production partner from some European countries, which allows us to access additional funding. So learning this way of working, I think, is very beneficial to building the industry and growing the industry, because growing the industry does require working together with other people, and the majority of that is working in co-productions. And I think for many production companies, this was the first time to work on a co-production, so there's a lot of learning that takes place. But what we did was, when we started the project, we just asked for story ideas. We didn't really need well-developed treatments, because we wanted people to first talk about the story idea, which we did then in 3 different story development workshops, one in Accra, one in Ouagadougou, one in Nairobi, where we brought 15 filmmakers together in each of these, together with some documentary experts, journalists, people who worked in the field of migration, to spend 5 days just talking through the stories on their own, individually, but also as a group, and building that story. And I think Chinidum, you, Chioma, and Fatima can all give some insight into how that story development workshop took place. From there, we then selected the strongest 35 stories and put in some development funding so that people could go out and start filming with the characters that appeared in their story, and also to create a professional treatment that would contain all the elements that a treatment needs in terms of story structure, the intent of the director, the budget, and also finding a production company to work with. So these processes are all really important part of the project. But right from the beginning, we always had the audience in mind. And so that is another point to discuss, how do we reach audiences with these films? Because we do want them to stimulate conversations. We do want them to stimulate dialogues around the issues that are raised in the film. And I think if you look at Fati's Choice, this issue of how people who return are discriminated against because they're seen as failures is something that hasn't really been brought to the fore. It hasn't really been brought into the open to public debate. And so I think there's going to be very interesting times next year when the films are all finished and they start going out to local audiences, to communities, and start this debate taking place. But, under this topic, discovering documentary, I think there's a question I'd like to raise as well and have some input from the three of you. And I'll start with Fatima, because when Fatima started with a story, she ended up with a different story.
That was my next.
And
That was my next question.
what was the process of that? How did that happen? And what gave you the confidence to be able to pick up on a new story and see that that was a much more relevant and deeper way into the subject that you were exploring? Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Yes, I guess that's a constant with documentary filmmaking, is that you start somewhere, you shoot something else, you end up somewhere else, you're editing another film, just because there's only so much you can predict. But yes, Fatih, please talk us through the journey of change. And also, in addition to Don's question, with COVID, I know COVID hits really hard in 2019 as well, and that I know affected the project. So did that cause your story to change in any way?
Talk about change, which was, when I started, I had in mind that my initial conversation with my character was why she decided, no, there was no why, but what she is doing currently as a returnee. You understand me? Like the treatment of how returnees are rebuilding their lives. That was my initial idea, but the more I spend time with her, the more I get to know so many things, the more I got to ask her questions. Exactly why. What was her reason for coming back? You understand? Because initially she was like, well, I just came because of my children, but I also wanted to explore deeper than that. You understand me? Because I also asked people around. I really shared this story, I guess, with people, my friends and all that, and they kept asking this question: what exactly made her come back, and what is her journey now that she's back home? So it kept ringing in my ears that no, I think there are more to Fati than just coming back home to rebuild her life. So that is where she shared her story about any development that comes into her life. You understand? So it was just not limited to what she's doing at the moment, but whatever development, she calls me, Fatima, this is what is happening to me. I ran to her, spent some time with her. So that connection enabled me to unearth a lot of, issues and questions, to be able to draft, my story to like in a current storyline. And also, one thing is the trust that she was able to share. So it all boils down to spending more time with her, being able to share a lot of things that you think can be beneficial to the story, and how best you can work around, to fit the main goal of the storyline. So basically, it was more of spending time with Fati.
So what was the core of the story now? Like after you spend time with her, like how, because we haven't had the opportunity to show the film at the festival. So if you could tell us where the film ended up.
Yes, so we see Fati, the criticisms in the community. You understand me? How people perceive Fati now that she's a returnee. So we have treating the issue of failure. How people see you that coming back home means that you didn't achieve your initial intention of seeking for greener pastures. How people see Fati being stupid. And how we see Fati fight through this her current situation. You understand? Because Fati came back. Her husband is still in Italy, trying to. He's still an irregular migrant anyway. For the past how many years he's been there, So Fati came back home. She got divorced because the husband felt that Fati has betrayed him. three of her kids were taken away from her. So luckily, I was able to go through that journey with Fati. You know, I was able to go through that journey with Fati. Fati was able to talk to me about her children. Whenever she's having a conversation with her children who have been taken away from her, they took them to a very remote village. You know, I was able to get Fati in that condition. When she decided to go for the children, Fati was able to share that with me for us to be able to get something from that situation. You understand me? And then you get to see Fati's family, what they also think about her. You understand me? So we're able to get all the story and then also share some of her intimate part, what Fati thinks now. You understand? We're able to go inside Fati very well, to be able to share her aspirations, you know, sometimes her challenges in life and what she thinks about her decision as well, apart from what people think about her. So basically, that is how far we've gone.
Thank you. Thanks, Fatima. I guess I just want to reiterate here that, like, even with documentary filmmaking, we're not looking for. It's not about talking heads. So even as she's telling the story, it's not that, you know, she's just like interviewing, and you're going from one interview to another interview to another interview. None of the documentaries. The first rule was literally no talking heads. So you needed to think about how to craft a story, how to tell the story, you know, how to build conflict, how to tell story, how to show the conflicts without it just being by exposition or by interview, by dialogue. So that's another way of kind of like of rediscovering documentary, and that's why we haven't, I guess, on the continent, that was a lot of the education that we needed to undertake in how to tell stories with documentaries. Chinedu, can you tell about the journey of your film, where you started from, how it changed, and some of the challenges that you had?
Okay. Basically, finding the character was my biggest problem. You know, I have the story. I know about these things that is happening. I've kind of shot a documentary before about people traveling, but the two documentaries I shot before about migration was through the eyes of those migrating. But during this period of when we went for steps, I actually thought, okay, why don't we see it through the eyes of those who help the migrators, you know, those who are migrating to go there. So I started looking for characters, you know, those who are helping the fixers. So that's what they actually called, or the clandestines. So I started looking for one. It took a long time before we were able to get one person. And then I went to Mauritania to meet them. During that period, I got another one. But then again, it was difficult because none of them wanted to open up because what they are doing is illegal. You know, so it made it very, very difficult for me to penetrate. You know, they only show me, okay, this is Choma, and she's a film curator, and that's all. Nothing else. They will not tell me whether she's a lady or she's a guy or whatever. You know, they just tell you one thing, and then if you hold on to that, then your documentary is absolutely nothing. So I have to start building that relationship, and somehow I had a good, I will call him a fixer as well because he's a filmmaker who is based in Mauritania. So I keep pushing him to keep getting closer to this guy. We'll get closer. We did like a lot of conference calls just for the guy to be free. Then over the years, within that first year and the second year, the guy started opening up till when we finally filmed the film. The first one, he only granted us interviews. He said, okay, I'm going to tell you everything. So we set camera and we did just face me, I face you documentary. So that's what I can call it. It's a face me and face you documentary. So we filmed him and he told us all the story. How the whole cabal is being run, how the whole thing is done, how you can travel, how you can, everything. How they bypass police, which is called the Coast Guards, how you bypass the Coast Guards, both the ones in Africa and the ones in Europe. So he gave us all the instances of, and then what happens on the road. Because trust me, during the journey, they might sort of have 200 people. But at the end, because of waves, they run into problems in the sea. At the end, they might somehow throw like 50 out of the boat, just so the boat can survive. So that's what happens on the sea. Whenever you hear people traveling through the Mediterranean, these things are bound to happen. So during filming, in fact, during the last days of my filming there in Mauritania, we have to enter the sea. We went maybe 20 kilometers during night, towards the evening time to night, and then we filmed a couple of stops in the sea. And I can tell you that it's not a journey anybody here wants to take, because it's very difficult. You're going to stay on that sea for like 5 days or so, trying to dodge the waves, trying to dodge coast guards, trying to dodge whatever it is that comes your way. So it's...
You're still on it.
Yeah, I'm still on it anyways. I'm not done yet.
You're still on it. Well, my film, initially I kind of imagined it. It was almost like fiction, I thought it was going to be this kind of like love story well, maybe they met online or through Facebook. Now, initially, because I guess for me, the first thing was what kind of subject did I want the film to be about? And I wanted a woman with agency. I wanted a woman who kind of went into, whether she had met him before or she hadn't met him before, she went into it with agency. I didn't want like a teenage marriage where it was kind of an arranged marriage and the parents were in control of, how the marriage happened. I preferred to tell a story with a woman who knew what she was doing and who was going through the marriage because she also wanted to travel, so in the hopes that when he gets his papers, he will now file for her and she will now go and join him. So I was very, so I guess in finding the subject, that's what I was looking out for. But it's also, especially here, it's also something that people don't talk about. You never know that you're going to a wedding and the groom is not there and you maybe only just see a picture. You don't really, nobody puts it on the IV. So it's hard to find someone who's going to do that before they do it. So for years, when I started out, what I was finding a lot of women who already had gotten married like that. And for some of them, they had still not seen, there was a relationship where they had, for 16 years, they've been married, but he had still not come back from Germany. So it was, so there was that situation. There was another situation where he had come back, but because he had a wife in Europe, he couldn't take her there. So he would come every 3 years, give her a baby, go back. And she was, she was now in his house. She was now in the family house, really serving his family and his mother, and with her, and taking care of his children. But she had not still, traveled. But then and because it was a short, so I really wanted it to be about the wedding day itself, the expectations of the bride and how, that would come apart, and how that would happen. So it was really, really hard, and I'm talking like years. I'd go to the east during Christmas to, even almost like go around and see maybe there's something happening. But then I found somebody, probably I got 2 days before she was about to get married. And so I didn't have like the luxury of like building that relationship, so, and which is really useful to have, but it was also because it was really time bound. I had to kind of like just go out. I knew 2 days before the wedding that he was in Dubai, so he wasn't going to be around. And yeah, and even what happened on that day, it's not something I'd seen before, because the wedding didn't even technically happen. Eventually, because he wasn't there. So they were, so his in-laws, or the in-laws who came to, you in the East, you have the bride price negotiation first, and when you agree, then the ceremony starts. But because, but it's the type of thing when you send somebody to go and do the job that you're supposed to do, anything you see, anything you see, you take it like that. And so the negotiations fell apart. Like, it's literally walked up, walked out. And she started the day in her father's house and ended the day in her father's house. And this is someone who, was really, she had gone, in her mind. She had already thinking about when she was going to go to Dubai to join him. So it's a very there's a it's very unpredictable, and so I'm kind of retelling the story along those lines. But then that's like, I guess that's the journey. Just the journey with the documentary is that something happens and you just have to, like, okay, so now where is the story, and how can we best tell the story, and how can it kind of remain, so I didn't have the picture wedding that I had in my mind all the while. I want to take just questions now, because I think we ran a bit late, so just so we can get in. So do you have any questions? I guess it doesn't have to be specific to the films or Generation Africa, just as because you have Don is a great, everyone here, is a great resource for documentary filmmaking right now. So if you have any questions, let's start. Okay. Hi.
Not so much a question as there's a commentary to the documentary that you're making. So it's amazing that stuff like this is being talked about, because I lived in France for a bit, and I knew there was a lady at the time at an organization I volunteered for, who they had gone through Libya. She and her boyfriend had gone through Libya. She was pregnant, but she still had to hustle Libya even while being pregnant. Okay. So she still had to hustle in Libya even while being pregnant. And they were in Libya for about 3 months. They came in from, it was a very long, very tedious journey. And what you said about people being thrown off the, it's not even a boat, it's like a raft, almost. And you have to deal with the violent waves in the sea and all of that. And there were people she knew that were thrown off. And I'm there thinking, so some of them, their parents are in Nigeria, thinking, these people have gone to Europe, or they've crossed over, and they're waiting for them to come back with, dollars and pounds and euros. And they don't hear from them for they never hear from them. And then you start thinking, well, did they marry someone and then forget us? Were they thrown into jail? You don't even know that they're somewhere in the bottom of the ocean. It's a very sad, and it's more common than we think. It's really more common than we think.
Okay, so I think what you should do first is when you say when she's in Libya, she has to hustle. Please, can you elaborate what that hustle is so that we know?
I thought that was pretty clear. She had to prostitute basically, even while being pregnant. Like she was about 6 or 7 months. Yeah, and she still had to prostitute in Libya, because some people have fetishes, right? Sleeping with pregnant women. She still had to do that to make money. For her and her boyfriend, they were trying to move over. So it was a very pathetic story. And there were lots of them like that. So they would come to this organization that was run by Reverend sisters, that would help them. It was a mess.
Okay, so let me just add a little bit of a story that I filmed. I think maybe 2012, 2013. It's about this lady who has traveled before. She traveled by road all the way to Libya. And then when she got to Libya, due to the crisis, that period, she has to come back. So one of her friends with her, on their way back, she died, but she died giving birth. So the only thing that returned from that lady is the baby. She died in the desert, and they kind of used sands to cover her, and then they brought the baby back. So she only went to the house, to the girl's house in Benin, to deliver the baby. And they were asking of the lady, and she said she would call them. Because she didn't want to be the person to deliver that message that she's dead. So till now that we are speaking, they don't know that she's dead. Yeah. So that's about some of the stories that we don't get to hear often that happens, and then we are so overwhelmed with this person have gone and he's doing well, this person have gone and he's doing well or she's doing well, and we don't know the rest of the stories. Those are just, the good stories are just like 1 or 2 out of 10. Yeah.
And I mean, the focus was even still kind of irregular migration. So it was people who couldn't, go to VFS, get a visa. Even though there were topics, there were, I think, there's so many subjects, there's so many ways to come at it. There's brain drain, there's the NGOs even, who are, there's a filmmaker who was investigating the NGOs who have turned it into, like corporate espionage in a way where they're making money off, and there's some NGOs even in Benin, in Edo State, that are making money off this process. But I guess with films, I think one central thing, it had to be character-driven stories, where we're not really. I mean, there's the big issue, but it's really what is the story like through the characters. Yes, I think he had his hand up.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joseph Duke. I'm a filmmaker. I'm passionate about narrative films, and I'm also passionate about documentary filmmaking. My question is really around finance, documentary. And I think
sorry?
my question is really around finance, documentary financing. Okay. And I would like Don to respond to this, if he can hear me. My first attempt in documentary filmmaking got me an award, and the award came with a scholarship to study abroad. So it's something that made me very passionate about documentary filmmaking, not because of the benefit, but because of the impact. Now, my question is, after I came back, I got a lot of jobs as a director, documentary director, but promoting my own story or getting my own story made was a challenge because, one, I have to get finance. I have to get funding for the documentary, and that was a challenge for me. And also, when you have a documentary that's going to take you years, that you don't even have an idea how long it's going to take. Do you understand? Take, for example, the story of God Grew Tired of Us. That documentary was for years. And I want to know, how do you budget something you don't know how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost you to make? That is my... And then, sorry, I also want you to talk about how do you motivate yourself. Sorry. It's just 2 questions. How do you motivate yourself when you get tired of the project along the way?
All right. Don?
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. Good questions. I'll start with the second one first. Too many filmmakers work in isolation, and that makes it very difficult to keep that motivation going. So find a team to work with. Find people who can support you in various ways. Build that group, build that community so that you can always go to somebody and say, look, I've got this problem, how do I deal with it? So that's something about motivation. And of course, the other part of the motivation is that creative drive that you have you've got this vision for the film and you want to see it created, made, and reaching an audience, and that drives you along with it. But build a community and team around you to help you reach that goal. With financing, that's always, of course, one of the biggest challenges, because without finance, we can't make these films. So you start where you know things best. So you start maybe in Nigeria and look for any funds that are available there, and you start applying to those funds. Now, in many African countries, there are no film funds. And so you have to look in other directions. And this is another point about co-production. So for us to finance these films, we go out and build a financial structure with partners who get to believe in the project and want to support it. The other part of the co-production is the local production company in, say, Benin or in Burkina Faso, then can also apply to film funds on their behalf. And together we co-finance the productions. In some cases it works better, in other cases it doesn't work so well, because finding those funds, applying to those funds with a very professional treatment, with professional visuals, is a journey on its own. But of course, there are certain film funds that are directed towards African documentary filmmakers. And the one is the Blue Ice Hot Dogs group in Canada that put out a call once or twice a year where you can submit for development funding, for production funding, and sometimes for post-production funding. It's the same with the It for Bertha Fund from Amsterdam, from the International Documentary Film Festival of Amsterdam, where you can also apply for development funding, use that to build that treatment, build that project through visuals, so you get the funding to go out, film with your protagonists, and then do enough research in order to write a really good treatment that'll attract further funding for production and then finally for post-production. So, so you use these different sources of finance. There's very seldom a single source of finance unless somebody's commissioning you to make a film. But in creative documentary, which is what we're talking about here, you've got to be creative in the financing of that as well. Because a creative documentary takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of time, and you need to be able to realistically schedule a plan that your budget will be able to cover, so that you don't run out of funding halfway through the film and are not able to complete it. So co-productions, you can also co-produce with production companies that have access to larger funds. So France, obviously, is a good co-production country to find a producer there that you can interest in the project and work on it together. The same in many other European countries, in North America, some in Asia. So you build the finance through these different ways. And of course, one way is to look for broadcast financing, which will never cover the whole film. So then you need to match it with another film fund, like the Blue Ice Hot Dogs or For Bertha Fund, or Sundance, Doha Film Fund. There are various film funds around that if you do research, you can find them, you can find access to these funds, and of course speak to colleagues, speak to Chioma, speak to Chinidum, speak to people in Nigeria and see how they have managed that process. And then the other source of funding is what we call soft funding, which is where you go to an embassy or a foundation or an institution which would be interested in the theme of your film. So they say, we want to improve education for young women, and your film is about a subject that deals with that. And so you go to them and you say, this is the amount of finance I've put together, this is what I still require, are you able to help co-finance the film? So you use these different strategies to build your finance plan which matches your budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yes. With glasses. No, sorry, he's at the back. He's been raising his hand.
All right, thank you very much. It's been an insightful straight questions. First, Chinedu, when you were speaking earlier, part of the challenges you mentioned that the process of making an internationally accepted documentary is different from what we're used to here. I know in the course of the talk, you had talked about not having talking heads. I don't know if you want to maybe say a little more about that just for knowledge sake. Secondly, for you still, the fixer that eventually opened up to you, I was just wondering what you told him or what his motivation was. And then the last one. I mean, from the attendance, I think we have an idea of what documentaries are in our climb here. Yours making blockbuster films here would have been packed. If you don't have an organization commissioning you to do a documentary, which is not purely about funding now, which just like you said, in those cases you work on it and then return to them and then they think about distribution and all. But let's even assume you've made the story, however you fund it. I don't know, what's the way to introduce documentary films to our culture to a point where we can have documentary screening at cinemas, fully packed? Like, where do we go from here? Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think I'm going to answer to your first and second question. The third one, Choma, and maybe Don can elaborate on that. Yeah, your first question was about my story, right? Okay, talking heads, yeah. Okay. So, when I was in film school, we used to, do documentaries. And documentaries are all about, I've had a story, this thing happened, this thing happened. And we'll go there, we'll see, okay, this Lady A or Mr. A is the subject that the issue is happening to. And then we'll sort of, sit the person down, ask questions, and then the person answers us. And then we'll take B-rolls. So at the end of the day, we have somebody who is telling us a story that have happened. So now the documentary we are making is we living with the character, which is quite different from what I knew about documentary earlier on. I've watched documentaries that are, okay, it's so entertaining that you think it is a fiction. Because you see all the activities, you see everything that is happening, But when you come down to Nigeria, you realize that 80% of our documentaries are maybe basically talking heads, maybe basically commercial documentaries like NGOs kind of documentaries. So you don't really have that luxury to live with that character. They are trying to release something on the 5th of January, and you have to film a documentary. Bro, you can't live with the character. You can't fight the character. So you just have to do whatever you have to do, get Mrs. A, get Mr. A, interview them, and then take B-rolls, and while this person is talking, you see some pictures, so that's it. So now, okay, back to your second question, which is, what did I tell the fixer? It is quite difficult because I did not promise him anything and I did not pay him anything. So what happened was that during the course of our communication, we keep going back and forth, asking him questions, trying to find out what it entails to travel, what it means to travel. He has been there before. He has been arrested. He has seen where they throw somebody out. The fact I don't know is, okay, he told us some stories. He told us, okay, he did not agree for them to throw the person out, but he knew that they threw people out. So those parts I don't know, because he tried to capture himself as, okay, he is a good guy. But yeah, we pushed him to the level that he gained our trust. We'll go to the house, we gist with him, we talk with him. It took a lot of time, like a lot of time, before we could be able to convince him. And another thing that happened is because he has already kind of resigned from the job. So he doesn't have anything at stake. I mean, he has some subordinates that when we got there, from the gate, they've already seized all our cameras, all our phones. Like they literally searched us, stripped us, removed anything that is camera, that is microphone, everything, they removed it because they don't want it. So it's him himself, he has kind of reached the level whereby he's in between trying to resign and trying to make money. He's actually there because he wants to make money. So that is why he can be able to open up to us, I believe. You know. So I think Choma will take the third question.
The audiences for documentary, I mean, that has been like, I guess for the past, I'd say 4 or 5 years, even working with the festival and programming for the festival, has always been how can we get people to watch documentaries? I think 2018, I even opened the festival with a documentary for Sama. Last year, I was going to open, before the festival got cancelled, I was going to open with Softy, which is a Kenyan documentary. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. And that was like, really kind of fantastic. So I guess it's, first of all, is them understanding that there is entertainment in documentary film. And it's not just, we're trying to tell you to be a better person, We're not, of course, the documentary films have impact and stuff and things, but it's how do you tell the story that is, first of all, entertaining? Because everyone has, we're all losing our focus, right? So we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram. Don has been doing, God's work with AfriDocs. I don't know if anyone here has gone on AfriDocs, if you're a documentary filmmaker, to see documentary films from African filmmakers. And even beyond, so and it's a free resource, like it's completely free of charge. It's just online. On YouTube, there's New York Times. There's the video, the opinion docs, op docs. So I guess the first thing is interest, and it's people understanding that this could be interesting. During the pandemic, I mean, everybody was watching Tiger King on Netflix, and so I guess building the audiences for documentary is, it will take time. It's not our kind of especially here, I guess it's not really our palette. But I think as filmmakers, we have an advantage as documentary filmmakers that even the fiction filmmakers don't have, because you don't need much, you can tell a story, you can really refine your storytelling, knowing that knowing that you're working with stories of real people. I've seen documentaries based around families where the filmmaker is telling a story of her parents, and you have those are subjects you have access to. So it's a really good way to kind of refine your storytelling. There's not a lot of people in the space, I would say. Even here, I know with East African filmmakers, I know they have DocuBox, and they have initiatives that are promoting documentary films. So there are not a lot of people in the space in the same way. So you can really, you can separate yourself. Ishaya Bako, I think he's around here. He's an award-winning documentary filmmaker from Nigeria. And he's told stories. Like his last documentary, I think, was about the prostitutes in Abuja, and how the policemen would, arrest them, silent night, and it was a really kind of compelling doc. So you can really start wherever you are. The subjects are all they're right in front of you. You can tell really fantastic stories, and you can tell it with your phone. You don't need you don't need to get actors. You don't need to call Adeswa. So you can so your budgets can also be be manageable. So I guess it's that whole you can. These guys, for instance, and the same way, I guess, even the panel before was talking about you just making films with what you have and starting where you are. I guess it's really important for us that I know if you pass through VI now, you see the guys that are, that are disabled, and they're controlling traffic, you know. Aren't you intrigued? You know, this guy is, you know, he's literally sitting on the floor on wheels, and you know, and they control traffic in VI, and then it's an interesting place to start. Like, how did they even get there? Like, you know, so I'm always curious. Like, did they get on the bus to come here? Did they wheel down? Who is he? Like, where did he come from? Why is he, you know, walking on that? So there's so many, and Nigeria, we're full of characters. You know, all the videos that go viral, we're so dramatic. You know, we're such an interesting people. So we really need to start telling stories about us that is, you know, really grounded in a real way. And so yeah, so I guess I'll throw it back to you. You know, it's like, what are you making that is compelling, and how can you get more people to watch that? And yeah. So I think we've run out of time. So I wanted to thank. Are there any questions? So I'll take one more. Okay. Okay. I'll take. So what's your question? Can you just quickly say? Okay. Okay, so how do you survive? Okay, what's your question? Okay. So, Fatih, I don't know if you heard that. I'm going to throw that at you. How do you make a documentary without talking heads? How are you able to convey the story in your film or as a documentary filmmaker?
Yeah, so for me, the first thing you need to do is to do a thorough research. You understand me? You need to understand what exactly you are talking about. So, first of all, you are not going to depend on whatever the talking head is telling you. You need to understand. You need to understand the situation. If she tells you, when I wake up, I go to school, how do you show that visually? You understand me? So there are certain elements that needs that visual representation. You understand? Yes. So it's just about doing the research and then pointing out what you can show visually other than just the talking heads. And this is what your research comes in. You need to spend more time on research, even I would say, than the shooting time. Because when you go on there, that you understand whatever you are going to take, because you don't have the luxury to be shooting 24 hours a day. No. So you need to do a lot of research, so to break it down on what you can show visually, because it's documentary is about visual. You understand, visual representation of whatever your ideas are. So basically, that is my 2 cents.
Yeah, so I mean, we still need treatments. You know, we still need to write. We still need to write an outline. It might not be a script, like fiction, but that's where your research will kind of like lead you to. You still need to write out your story. You still need to kind of spell it out, and then you start to know, like, okay, like she said, like, how do I show this instead of the person? And that's a good exercise actually. If they don't have to say it, how can I show it? You know, how else? It might be conversation. That it might be conversation, it might just be visual, it might be a sound. There's so many, like, you just kind of think about how to tell the story without the person sitting down and saying it. But that's, yeah.
Okay, just to add to
okay, and then after that you can tell us how you survive.
Okay, so just to add to both what they are both saying, I think before I started my documentary, I penned down about maybe 100+ questions that I needed to ask. So if I was to place my character and do a talking head, I'm going to ask 100+ questions. So those questions were what, kind of led me to discover who the character is, what the character does, how he does those things, where he does those things, when he does those things, and how everything is being done. So anytime I have a problem, I go back, I look at those questions, and I'll be like, okay, I've not asked him if, for instance, they are going to stay for 5 days on the sea, how are they going to survive? So I will look at the question, and then I will try to find out in between how they are going to survive that 5 days in the sea, in the Mediterranean, while traveling. So those are the things that, you know, makes your documentary to have weight, or to, you know, kind of have a certain level of narrative, because you have to understand, okay, what really happens. Not you taking a camera, filming whatever you want to film, but you have to have an idea of what is going to happen. So you prepare yourself and know that, okay, this might happen here, this might happen here. Yeah. And your next question is what?
What else do you do? How do you survive? Are you hungry?
Okay, trust me, I'm not hungry as a documentary filmmaker. Yeah. I mean, documentaries are difficult to film, but before you venture into documentary as a Nigerian, trust me, word on the streets, make sure you have something doing. Yeah, make sure you have something doing. Don't just say because Chioma is doing documentary, or because Maxi is doing documentary and you want to do documentary. Make sure you have something that feeds you. Because first off is that you don't know when the story is going to stop. I'll give you an instance. Just like now, if I heard that my guy is ready to travel, I can still go back to Mauritania to film. And I've not, the ones I've been shooting for like 2 years now, I'm still in post-production. So it's a difficult terrain, but you have to be careful what you want to do. You have to have passion for documentaries before you venture into it. I'm not trying to discourage anybody, but yes, where we are, where we live, in the country that we find ourselves, you have to be brave to be a documentary filmmaker.
Yeah. Fatih, do you have any? I would round up and also answer your questions. Do you have any? What else, as a filmmaker? You know, how do you make it work? And then, if you have any closing remarks as well, you can just say. You're on mute.
You really need to be passionate about the story you want to tell. You understand me? Because especially for a documentary filmmaker, you are part of the storytelling process. So if you find yourself telling a story that you are detached, whether you like, no matter how good the story is, definitely you see there's some kind of detachment. And as to how, I don't know, but you have to be passionate about the topic that you are treating, and also have the patience, okay, to learn how to manage people, because especially with documentary protagonists or characters, it's all about managing them, because there are people that you are not paying, but still you are with them. They should make time for you. You understand? So you should have the patience on knowing how to relate with them, you know, so that it doesn't end up being kind of a monetary issue. Because the moment there's an issue of money, you know how our countries are, everything is about money, and to an extent it's understandable. But you should know how well to relate to your characters, and then also be passionate about the topic that you want to treat, and then have the patience, because it's a very long journey, as you say, and a rewarding one as well.
Thanks, Don. You've been in this game for decades and decades and decades. What do you have? Any final remarks?
I would say watch as many documentaries as you can. And so thanks for mentioning afridocs.net. And thanks for AFRIF as well. It's about finding your audience for the films, but watch documentaries so that you can see how other people are crafting their stories, because you don't want to have a story that is a lecture. You don't want to have a story that is flag waving. You don't want to have a story that's flat. It needs to live and it needs to have emotion with the characters and drama, as Chirma said. So I think part of that process is watching as many documentaries as you can to develop your own style and your own way forward. And as Fatima says, lots of research is really important, and have the passion. So thanks, Sherman.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Fatih. Thanks, Shnidam. And I think thank you guys for all coming for the session. Thanks to Ashford for putting it together. But yes, I guess I echo what everyone says. You know, it's you have to be passionate about it. It has to be a story that, I guess, in a way only you can tell, you know, the way that you want to tell it, and then, you know, build community. There's so many, there are funding opportunities that, you know, that are available based on your story, based on how you're applying for it. But yes, it will take time to get it done right. And thank you all for coming, and hope you make films and hope you watch films. Zinda is one of the Generation Africa documentaries, and it's showing today at 5:10. And Zinda is a really interesting story, also kind of around fixers, but based in Niger. At the border, and what's happening even with Nigeria. I was supposed to read the bio, but yes, so please do check it out. And thank you so much. I think the next panel is starting here. Sorry? Last Shelter showed yesterday, so you've missed that, but you can catch Zinda today. And the next session, I think, is starting here at 4. And yes, thank you for coming to AFRIF. Hope to see you all.
Just one. How many? Two. It's one person's via Zoom. One person's via Zoom. How to be honest? We're starting at 4. I've not eaten one thing today. Starting at 4. When it starts, one person can go, but Zoom will flip everything.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, Brad. Can you hear me?
I'm so sorry. We had a time change. I wasn't supposed to be on 50 minutes, 40 minutes.
No, it happens to the best of us. Thank you so much for readjusting your schedule. How was your jog, by the way?
Now I'm readjusting my clothes because I didn't expect to be on camera so ready.
You always have to be camera ready, baby. How was your run?
How are you? I'm so sorry. My run was great down at the beach. I'm sorry to keep everyone waiting, and I'm sorry to keep you waiting. My apologies.
We're gonna dive straight in. For those of you who don't know who Brad is, you should. He's one of the preeminent producers in Hollywood, and he's been making films for almost as long as I've been alive, which is something, which is huge, in such a tough industry, as you all can vouch for. And Brad is generously giving up his time today to share some of his knowledge in the industry. But I'm gonna dive straight in because we had the time difference thing. So if you guys want to know more about Brad, do your Googles right now, because I'm not gonna give you the CV. I'm not gonna let him give you the CV. But where I'm gonna start is with Queen and Slim. We all love Queen and Slim, right? And so I'm going to start with Queen and Slim because it's such an important film to the culture, the beauty of it all, the way it was written, the way it was shot, that, it's almost like Melina, sort of invented this new film language that perfected all her music video work and brought it to film. I'm going to ask you, how did you get involved?
Well, again, my apologies for being late, everyone. I'm sorry to keep you waiting. I feel really badly about it. Sorry. And nice to see all of you, and nice to meet all of you virtually. And thank you so much for your support of our movie a couple of years ago. It was Nigeria and the continent in general were really important to our filmmakers, and obviously Daniel is from Nigeria. And
he's not. He's from Uganda. That's my boy from school. He's not Nigerian. I refuse for you to misquote where he's from. That's my boy. That's my boy from. I used to sell that boy chocolates and sweets in school. Yeah, really, true stories.
Nigeria was super important to the film's release, and I appreciate everybody's support for the film. So, the movie, so I was making a little film with someone named James Fry, and James said to me, we were making a movie based on this book called A Million Little Pieces, and James originally came up with the idea for Queen and Slim, and said, and saw Lena at a party and told Lena about it, and Lena said, you can't write that, I'll write that. So James told me about the movie, and at the time he told me about the movie, it was meant to be a very low budget, $60 million movie, and I loved the idea of it, and I made an unsolicited offer to finance the movie to Lena and Melina, and the truth is I made 5 unsolicited offers to Lena and Melina before they even agreed to talk to me. So I just found the movie, unfortunately, and to be so relevant to our times, and I thought it was going to be, I was starting the company for the first time. I was starting the company, and I thought it would be a really, really powerful film to make a statement for our new company, and I thought it would really be emblematic of what I stand for as a producer and an executive, and what I wanted our company to stand for. So I really chased the film hard. I chased Lena and Melina hard, all based on this one line understanding of what the movie was going to be, and then having a lot of knowledge, working knowledge, obviously, of who Lena and Melina were as filmmakers. So that was the genesis of this. I just heard an idea, and it was meant to be a differently budgeted picture than it ended up being, and I sought them out quite aggressively.
So at that point, James, just to be clear, James of 3 Black Dots.
Yes.
Previously, I'm actually James. James is a great guy. I'm actually working with him at the moment. And but how did you then get my boy Daniel from Uganda and Jody from I don't even know where Jody's family originated from, but from the UK also. How did you get them involved?
So it started with first of all, I'll go back. Lena and Melina, we had an early morning breakfast one day, and I was petrified for the meeting, and it was interesting. You know, I was so nervous to sit with them. I did a lot of homework and a lot of legwork in preparation for the conversation. I think Melina is a really super talented filmmaker, and I love and Lena, I think, is a trailblazer, honestly. And I think that I have just such amazing respect for the two of them. And I went to and it was such an important initiative for our new company. So we had a breakfast one morning, my then partner Pam Abdi and I, with Lena and Melina, and we had this amazing conversation. And the truth is, I just wasn't the person they intended to make this movie with as a middle-aged white man. You know, I mean, let's just be straight about that. And they had no intention of making the movie with me, and they had no intention that I was going to be somebody that they thought they would partner with. So the courting process started, and it was a long process of us getting to know each other, and really, you know, hard fought trust between us, and it was really beautiful. And it ended up, I'll go backwards, and then I'm going to answer your question. I'm sorry, but I think it's important to get some context. The movie was a life-changing experience for me and for my family and for everybody involved with it. It was a really powerful experience, and for me, spending those 2 years working with these two incredible women, in particular, two women of color, quite frankly, for me, they changed my POV on the entire life, and they impacted my family, and they impacted me in ways that was deeply profound, and has really shaped what I will do for the next chapter and last chapter of my career. So working with them was really a beautiful experience that changed everything in my life, and getting into business with them was as I said, a hard-fought process of gaining their trust. They had met with Daniel, and Daniel was part of the equation, although we did not have a deal for Daniel when I got involved in the process. Jody joined the equation through a casting process. You know, Lena and Melina very independently, and part of the deal was we gave all creative control and rights to Lena and Melina, and said, you guys understand and know how to make this movie better than we do. It represents an aspect of your culture more than mine, and we're gonna allow you to be in control of all these decisions. And we did that happily and comfortably. And they just found Jody through the casting process. And then once we did acquire the film, we had to set about the challenging and quite frankly arduous task of making everyone's deals. And there were a lot of moving pieces in this because we had we had a finite budget for the movie, although it was much higher than where it originally started. But putting the pieces together kind of felt was what I did as soon as I got involved. But Daniel came with the project.
That's fantastic. So I'm gonna take a side step now. So if I'm a young filmmaker, I want to get a star in my movie. I've made maybe 1 or 2 movies already. Think back to when you were at that stage in your career. What was it like getting the star to close the deal, or getting the star that you felt was going to bring the box office? What tips would you give someone that's, you know, at that stage of their career?
You know, it's really trite to say what I'm about to answer that question with, but it's always about the material. You know, it's about the filmmaker, and it's about the material. If the script is great and there's trust in the director, then I have seen, you know, stars over their careers who, you know, command the biggest salaries in the industry doing it for scale, right? So it really just depends on the script, and I think that all really goes back to giving everyone who I'm virtually speaking with right now, who we're virtually speaking with, confidence to believe in what you're making, right? Believe in the story you're telling, and really have a point of view in what you're saying and what you want to say with the material you're writing, and or you're producing, and or you're directing. And then it's about perseverance. It's getting it, you know, over years, you obviously build relationships with the talent themselves, but there's a traditional path of getting through their representation and going through the process of getting to them. And great material in our industry is the cornerstone of what we make and what we do. And it's really hard to come upon great scripts, you know. I made another award called picture, that had biggest stars in the world in it, and they all work for scale. And that was 12 Years a Slave, and that movie came to me, and it was packaged, and they were 6 weeks away from starting production. They needed $6 million to finalize the budget, and they asked us if we would finance it. And they had all those great actors already packaged in that movie, and they did that because of Steve, and they did that because the material was so powerful. So it really goes back to who is your filmmaker, and who as an actor are you going to trust to pull out this performance from you? And then it's really about, is the material going to get their attention, and do they want to embody this character?
So you said 12 Years a Slave, it came to you 6 weeks before they went into production. What was that? Tell us about that process.
Well, it was a life-changing process for me, so I remember it vividly.
One can only imagine how life-changing it was for you.
I remember it so vividly. I'll tell you in detail. It was I had a long-standing relationship with Plan B, which is Brad Pitt's production company, and I have, from when I used to work at Paramount Pictures, and I was now, at this point in time, I was running a company called New Regency, and it was 10 to 4 on a Thursday afternoon, and I was driving to meet my wife at an appointment for our daughter's school, and I got a call from Dee Dee Gardner, who's Brad's partner and one of the producers of the movie. And we were very close. We had a very close working relationship, and we had made some films together. And she said, "Brad, I need you to pay attention. We'd like you to read a script of ours. We think it can go the distance. It's going to be taught in schools one day, and we think it's brilliant. And this is what we need." I so vividly remember the conversation. I can tell you the time of the day and the day of the week that it was. I pulled over to the side of the road. We had a long conversation. Arnon, who owned the company, and myself, and there were others at the company, read the script that night, and the next morning we agreed to put the money in and finance the movie.
Next morning?
It was really, the next morning. The whole process took 12 hours. Maybe 16 hours. And it was just an undeniably beautiful script. Steve, in our opinion, is an undeniable filmmaker, and the subject matter itself speaks for itself. And the cast was as amazing as it was. So it really wasn't that challenging of a decision once we were presented with such a beautiful piece of material, with such a great filmmaker and such a great cast.
Let's talk about the difference between 12 Years a Slave and Queen and Slim. They're completely different, but actually at the heart of both movies, you've got, in a way, auteurs. These filmmakers, you've got directors that are essentially, they make what they like, in essence, in that, they're two of the most sought out directors in the world, right? And so was there a difference between working with Melina and Steve?
Yeah, on every level. But there's a difference working between every filmmaker. Everybody has their own signature approach to things, and everybody does things differently. But yes, there was a huge difference, and there's a huge difference in time. There's a huge difference in subject matter. It was very different. I think working with Steve informed everything about our experience of making Queen and Slim on some level, but it was, it was a huge difference. Each was a singular experience, because I think what Steve and Melina have in common are they're singular filmmakers. I think they each have their own style, they each have their own point of view on how they want to make movies, and they each have their own point of view of what they want to say in their careers. So great filmmakers are all singular. There's no two built the same, and there's no two who approach it the same way. So everything about working with Steve and Melina was different, but equally as powerful and beautiful of experiences, and they both have become dear friends in my life.
You're a powerful filmmaker, right? You're a powerful producer. And we're hearing a lot at the moment from black people globally that, they don't want to see more trauma stories. They don't want to see slavery. They don't want to see, as much as we love these movies and they're well executed, they don't want to see black trauma on screen. So tell us, do you have anything on your slate that speaks to Black and African people? And if you do, what are those films exploring?
I do, and I've spent a lot of time speaking to Melina about it, quite frankly. And I think as an industry and myself speaking for it personally, I think it's really important now because of the bad state of the world and the racism that has, kind of come to the forefront of the conversation. I think it's really important for us to present imagery and stories that show the world that the way we want it to look. I think we have to show positivity in representation, and I think it's really upon us to do that. And as I look at, and I agree with you that Black people don't want to see trauma. And by the way, we had a lot of that in Queen and Slim. The aftermath was, we were accused of trauma porn, and there was a lot of online conversation about that. And it was a conversation that you can only imagine we had amongst ourselves and took very seriously and discussed amongst ourselves. And in the aftermath of that, the takeaway was now we have to show positive representation and show the world the way we want it to be. It may not be there, but I think our job as an industry, as storytellers, is always to lead by what we make, and use our platform to show and depict what might seem idealistic to some, not to all of us, but to some, right? But we have to use our platform. If you show it, then it can happen. And yes, I am developing a lot of material right now. Not a lot of material. I'm developing some material right now, absolutely through that lens of positivity and positive representation.
Tell us a bit more about Make Ready Studios. What are you guys up to? What are your plans? And do you plan on doing something for us here in Africa? No pressure.
I would love to do something. I would love to do something in Africa. I actually tried to develop something there about 3 years ago, and was unable to sell it to a streamer. But it is a huge marketplace. Obviously, it's an emerging market. So I think this conversation, one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have this chat with you and to talk to this audience, was I think you all are sitting at the threshold of such an exciting opportunity and time for your industry in Nigeria and in Africa in general overall. I think it's an explosive moment in the best of ways in the next, I don't know, let's call it 1 to 10 years, right? There's going to be so much opportunity, I hope, that will be presented to all of you in this room and on this Zoom, that I think it's very exciting. So Make Ready, we recently just left, left our original financiers about 5 weeks ago, and partnered with a company called Endeavor Content, who is our partner on a go-forward basis and financing the company. We just wrapped production on 2 movies this summer. We're in week 4 of another film that's shooting right now for Disney Plus. So we have another one shooting in January. So we made 6 movies in 4 years. 2 of the years were in COVID, and we started with nothing. So I'm super proud of what the company achieved in fairly short order, but it's been very challenging. Not only is the industry going through a massive did the industry go through a massive transformation, and is the industry in the midst of a massive transformation? But we were starting from nothing. So, having gotten or made five and making 6 movies in that short period, to me was no small task. And I'm very proud of what we achieved. And we've done some stuff in television. We shot some short films, and we shot some alternative stuff. And it's been exciting. So I think the industry has now revealed itself for the new ecosystem is starting to reveal itself, is the way I'll put it. The streamers have come to the forefront. The theatrical business globally and domestically in the U.S. has changed dramatically. And we can unpack that if you want. It's up to you. I'm happy to have that conversation. And I think, you know, the emerging markets of Latin America, hopefully the Middle East, hopefully Africa, are starting to accelerate the pace within which they're emerging. Obviously, the existing international markets have just gotten stronger, and I think you're seeing local language shows, is what I'll say, that are built to go out globally, you know, really becoming major initiatives for the streaming platforms. And I think that provides such incredible opportunity for all of you who we're having this conversation with right now. You look at shows going back a couple of years, like Gomorrah coming out of Italy, Fauda coming out of Israel, Squid Games a couple of weeks ago coming out of Korea. These are all local shows that are speaking to local, that are coming from local culture, that are being made and reaching global audiences that never occurred before. So there's absolutely nothing stopping that from happening out of Africa. And I think, and knowing the size of your country and the marketplace, it's such an incredible opportunity that you are, again, on the forefront of. I don't know when it's going to happen. None of us know when it's going to happen. And I don't think any of us none of us saw Squid Games coming until Squid Games blew up the world, right? So no one knows when it's going to happen, but you do know you're sitting at the epicenter of this moment right now for it to happen. And I think that couldn't be more exciting. And I hope everyone in your audience is energized by that opportunity.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the streamers, right? So they have completely shaken the game. And has that changed the way that you approach your projects? Is it streamer first or box office first or a mixture of both, or do you care? Or, you know, like, because, you know, a few years ago a lot of filmmakers were anti-streaming, but now everyone's come to accept that with the global pandemic, that's probably the way the world is going to be now, right? And how do you feel? What are your thoughts on streamers? Someone from Amazon might be here, I don't know.
Streaming, the answer is yes, it's changed the equation. Yes, it's changed my personal thought process, and streamers are here, and they've been embraced. So it's not as if we have to embrace them, they have been embraced, right? I think, as you just said, the global pandemic has changed the theatrical marketplace. I think and forever, you know, the theatrical marketplace is vibrant, as we've seen with a couple of releases over the last 6 weeks, give or take. But they're big tentpole movies. They're Marvel movies. They're James Bond. They're Venom. You know, they're big tentpole movies. So what we haven't seen in the theatrical marketplace are the movies that I've made for certainly the majority of my career, but the last 10 years of my career, which are the sophisticated, well-made, filmmaker-driven adult dramas. Right? We don't know how those are going to play theatrically. There certainly are enough indications that the theatrical marketplace is not disappearing through the size of some of these bigger pictures, but is it now relegated to tentpole movies is really what we don't know yet, right? There's not enough of a sample size to understand that. So you have to embrace the streamers. That's where our business is, and that's who's financing our movies and our television shows and our limited series. You know, I was on the phone 2 weeks ago, with the head of international for one of the major 4 streamers, and he said the 8-hour limited series is the new 2-hour movie. You know, he's working with some of the best filmmakers in the world who are making these 8-hour movies, and they have a big canvas, they have huge budgets, and they're directing all 8 hours now. It's a gigantic undertaking for a filmmaker. It's a gigantic undertaking for us producers, and it is no different. On some level, it is an 8-hour movie instead of a 2-hour movie. It's just being told as a limited series, and I think that we all have to embrace streamers. I think the personalities of the streamers are revealing themselves right now, and I think and the volume, who they are, what their each individual and distinct personality is starting to reveal itself, and then it's up to us individually as filmmakers of where we slot into that equation. You know, for me, I've always been a director-driven producer, and I love working with great directors, and that is what feeds my soul. And nothing about that has changed. I believe that although the streamers have definitely gone for mainstream content, quality mainstream content still exists, and I love making quality mainstream content. So there's no harm in I don't believe the streamers have done damage to the business. I think we've pivoted and they've given us a big opportunity.
We've obviously speak a lot about successful moments and great things and being involved in films that have won Oscars and so on and so forth. Tell us about your worst moment in your career. He's like, this is not on the list. But I want to, because I think it's important for up and coming filmmakers to understand not just to see the highs, but it's important for them to see, examples of what sort of pitfalls or moments that you'd rather forget. Or can you think of one? Or it's just all good.
I'll tell you four. And they range because some of them, one's funny, some of them are scary, and some of them and one's personal.
I think let's do the funny one last.
The funny one last. Okay. So the worst personal experience was I was president of a studio and I lost my job. And I lost something that I was fired on a Friday afternoon from my job, and I loved my job. And I was really successful at the studio, and it was a big professional setback for me. And it was horrible. It was really horrible. And and all I can say and all I can encourage you to do is take a setback and learn from it. I went deep inside. I cried, and I lost something that I loved and I valued, but I lost something in success. So I said, okay, how do you get fired in success? You have to really have done something wrong, So I fundamentally looked and analyzed and went inside myself and made changes to how I conducted myself in ways that I believe led to that setback. And the next chapter of my career was the best chapter of my career. That's when I left from Paramount to Regency. And in Regency, we made Birdman, Revenant, 12 Years a Slave, Gone Girl, Noah, Big Short. We probably had one of the greatest runs in the history of independent financiers, And that was all a byproduct of learning from my failure instead of wallowing in my failure and really making fundamental changes to how I conducted myself. So I don't know if that answers your question.
That's a great one. I love that one. Number one.
And I mean it really seriously. Don't get mad. Learn from it. The universe is telling you something if you fail, right? And make it work for you. Flip it around and turn it into advantage and learn from it. I went deep inside. I made fundamental changes to how I conducted myself. And those fundamental changes opened up the world to me. And so one. I was making a big movie once, and it got away from me. It was the hardest experience of my life, and I've made somewhere between 125 and 150 movies.
Guys, can we just have a round of applause for that? That's 125 to 150 movies in 30 years. That's incredible. But anyway, sorry.
In 30, you're aging me down, 36 years. But either way, in some capacity as a producer and executive, that's somewhere in that zone. And this one was super challenging. And I would say that a couple of things I'll say from challenging experiences was I asked people for advice, and because I didn't know what to do. I had a movie that was really out of control, And it was late in my career, right? It was late in my career. I'm not here. Let's talk about it in reality. It was The Revenant, and The Revenant was a hard film. It was written about as a hard film. I ended up loving the movie, and it made a fortune, and it was profitable. But it was a really hard film to make. There were articles written about it. So halfway through the movie, Alejandro was struggling. I was struggling. The budget was struggling. We were over budget, and I didn't know what to do. And I asked a lot of professional people in my life what to do, and I took it all in, and then I tried to make the best decisions I could make for the movie. And I guess that's the advice. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And this is a collaborative group experience in movie making. It is a singular experience of the filmmaker, and my job, and I think why I'm a good producer and why I was a good executive, is I love working with talented directors, and our job always is to service the movie and to service the director and the director's vision. I will say to you, as a producer, speaking to other producers, some producers lose sight of the forest through the trees, and they think their only job is to work for the director and to get the director everything they want. I would say, yes, that's part of our jobs, but our job is really to make sure the movie gets what the movie wants, right? And not just the director, to see the big picture. And to see the big picture, you have to understand what the financier's needs are, what the movie's needs are, what your director's needs are, and how are we ultimately going to make the best movie possible that people will want to see. So when I was making The Revenant, and Alejandro and I were really struggling, not struggling together, struggling to dig out and unearth this movie in really challenging physical production conditions and really challenging budgetary conditions, I asked for help, and I asked other filmmakers for advice on what they would do, and then one filmmaker who is a world-class filmmaker who happens to be a friend of mine, and I'm not going to name his name, I called him and I asked him for help. And we were in the middle of a conversation, and somewhere in the conversation he said to me, "Is it good?" And I paused and I said, "Dude, I think it's great." I said, "I think it might be great. I think it's maybe the best thing I've ever been part of." And he paused again, and he said, "The only way out is through." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Now you got to make the best movie you can possibly make it big." And I took that to heart so intensely and helped Alejandro only through that lens. Which is the only, we were in so much trouble, and we were so over budget that the only thing we can possibly do now was to give him more instead of giving him less. So it was antithetical to every thought process you might have had, which is, oh, you're over budget, so now pull back and cut and do this. No, the answer was to give him more so we can actually finish the film properly, even with all the challenges we had, so we can make the best version of the movie possible. So then that big, expensive movie can have a chance to be successful. That's the second story.
Number two. Number three. Is this the funny one?
No, but I forgot the third one, so I'm going to tell you the funny one.
Right.
So we made a movie when I was at Paramount called Cloverfield. And the whole idea behind Cloverfield was to make a handheld film. We were making the intention that the filmmaker J.J. Abrams said to me is, let's make a lower budgeted film, a huge tentpole movie, and by that we defined it as a $150 million movie. Let's make the lower budgeted film for $25 million. So we're going to make a tentpole movie that had the scope and scale of $150 million, but we're going to do it handheld, and we're going to change the business. So JJ is super private and doesn't like, and is fear, and back in those days when we made the movie, people would see movies and they would write about them and they would leak what the movie was about, and we didn't want to do that. So the movie, if any of you saw it, was a handheld film, and it was meant to be shot handheld, and we never screened the movie for an audience, and we added shake to the camera through visual effects in the post-production process. So at the premiere, we put the movie up on a big screen for the very first time for an audience, and people started running up the aisle vomiting because we added too much shake, and we had never tested the movie because JJ didn't want to show it to an audience for fear of getting it reviewed, and then we added shake to the movie, and we got people sick.
So always test your movie.
Show your movie to people.
Show your movie to people, you know? You might learn, you might get some insight through that experience. Does anyone have any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Look, there's a man right back there, Is the mic on? Sorry, Brad.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Hi, Brad. I have about the process. Is this working? Yeah. Is it possible to take us through an hypothetical a Nigerian?
I'm sorry,
We can't hear you, mate.
Sorry. Is this better?
Much better.
Yes. Oh, great. All right. So yeah. Hi, Brad. I was saying, might it be possible to give us a hypothetical path for a Nigerian film that might end up at the Oscars? What would that look like? For a film produced by Nigeria, maybe a co-production actually, you know. But what would the path look like if that was ever to happen within the next maybe 10 years? What would that look like? What are the stages that it would have to go to
wait. So your question is, so what would it take for a Nigerian film to
not necessarily what would it take, but if this was the end, could you walk back the process to Nigeria, that is? So if today you make a movie with a Nigerian producer, for instance, and it gets to the Oscars, I'm saying what are the stages that that film would need to go through to get there? Totally hypothetical.
This is so hypothetical, Brad. I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna change this a little bit, right? And so, let's take 12 Years a Slave. It won an Oscar. How did that happen? We start with you're seeing the speech, Oscars. Let's forget the controversy that happened around the speech. But Oscar speech, it's amazing. Let's rewind back to how it got to that stage.
It's a long journey to get to the Oscars, and it's a creative journey of the movie, and it's working, and it's a real team effort in the marketing, and both the marketing of the movie and the positioning of the movie in the campaign from the outset, right? 12 Years a Slave, we had our first premiere of the movie at the Telluride Film Festival, and we had an incredible premiere. It was one of the great nights of everyone's life, right? It was awesome. And from that moment on, let's go back. So we made the movie independently, right? We have a distribution deal with 20th Century Fox at the time when I was at Regency, and we made the movie independently. Regency put up the domestic financing. We worked with a man named Bill Polat and his company who sold international rights, and so it was not a global deal. It was a domestic deal and then an international deal, and then international territories were sold. We screened the movie for Fox Searchlight at the time, and who was an award caliber, let's call it the independent division of big 20th Century Fox, and they agreed to distribute the movie, with us and for us. From that decision on, we were meant to be an Academy caliber film. Look, we were an Academy caliber film because of Steve. Steve had been through this dance before and had gotten close and never certainly been through the full process, but we were an Academy caliber film from Steve. Once Searchlight agreed to distribute the movie, that was our plan, and everything was built around a campaign to introduce the movie on the festival circuit, then go through a platform release of the movie, simultaneously creating an Academy campaign, which started and then built momentum at Telluride. And then it is exhaustive and exhausting process to go through the Academy campaign. You know, you have to screen the movie as much as you can for everybody you can who has a vote. We also on that film really want to create a grassroots marketing for the movie's success, and we happen to think the best tool we had for that movie was the movie itself. So we showed the movie to whoever we could, whenever we could, as early as we could. We believe the movie spoke for itself. And we showed it to activist groups and church groups and culture leaders and also on the Academy circuit. We put Steve out in front of the movie. We used the star wattage of the movie to help us get there. So I don't know if that answers your question, but the distribution pattern of the movie and the marketing pattern of the movie are a big part of the Oscar campaign, and it is a well thought out, expensive, exhausting campaign that one has to go through. Movies can be discovered, I guess, slightly virally is the wrong word, but movies can be discovered and take over the Oscar campaign. Most, in today's day and age of information and overload of information, nothing is unknown, you know? You just, unknown things don't exist, right? So you know, you can look at another round last year, which I watched because we quite frankly made a deal to you know which one best foreign film, right? And that emerged from a great filmmaker, and that just was a great movie that went on its journey through international to winning best foreign film. So there's two paths to answer your very specific question, which is how does a movie out of Nigeria or a Nigerian film, you know, go on an Oscar path? It would seem to me that the path is through best, you know, foreign film versus best picture, but that's not an all accurate statement at all, because it also can be a global film, to the conversation we had a half hour ago, which is these global marketplaces are blowing up and local language films are becoming global movies more easily right now. So it could also compete in the as best picture, but certainly best foreign film is let's start there as a great route to getting into the Oscar conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time, Brad. We've got one more question, two more. They have to be really quick because my time's done.
Very, very quickly. Hi, Brad. Thank you so much for the valuable information. Quick question to you. I'm doing a co-production between Los Angeles and Africa, Nigeria here. I am running into, I know your movie was a SAG movie. I'm running into issues with SAG because I don't have a huge budget, but they will not give me an ultra low budget to even be able to hire SAG actors because I'm shooting overseas. Are you familiar with that? Or, I mean, I guess you're using a standard budget, but I mean, it's kind of making it a little challenging to get around that in order to be able to use talent here and use talent in LA as well. Because they're not really crossing paths, but, you know, I still, you know, it's essential to the movie.
The answer is I don't have real expertise, and I'm sorry I can't give you a proper, you know, answer or be all that helpful. I've never really made a non-union picture, so I just haven't had that much experience at it. You know, I assume you're in talks directly with SAG to understand what you would need to do to qualify to be able to work with them. That would, I don't know if you're working with the U.S. or a U.S. line producer who can have those conversations for you, but my suggestion would be to interact directly with SAG to understand the parameters of what you need to do to qualify to become a SAG picture or under their low budget agreement, and to see if you can meet those qualifications. Beyond that, I'm sorry, but I don't have a ton of advice to offer you.
Jenny, we've got no mic. You can take mine. Quicker, look, I'm climbing. No, I'm not allowed. Sorry. I'll sit down.
Hi, Brad. How are you? So, first of all, I want to say apologies for the time confusion. Brad, by the way, was all into this and really looking forward to it. And the time change in the U.S. threw us for a loop because I'm living the life over here, Brad. And I totally forgot about your time change. So I'm really sorry. But we're happy to have you here, and we're so excited. And so my question to you is, I brought to Brad a project that my partner and I had optioned, and it was a novel based on the one of Jefferson's slaves, which turned out to be one of the most. He actually read the U.S. Constitution before Jefferson read the Constitution, and I thought it was a great story, but it was also a story about the hardship of slavery and so forth. And Brad, and I sent it to Brad, I said, hey, can you, tell me what you think of this? And his response basically got me to walk away from the project, my partner and I to walk away from the project. And I don't know if you remember your response, but it was, Jenny, I'm not making those kind of movies anymore. He goes, I'm at a different place. And it was right after Queen and Slim, right? And it made me rethink, the kind of stories that we want to tell. And that's been a big theme here, actually, throughout the festival. So, help these filmmakers, young filmmakers, with some kind of, when you say you went in deep, right? What does that mean? I mean, you look at money, right? They're trying to make films. They're trying to make money. They're trying to get noticed. They're trying to make sure they make the right moves for the next step. What can you say about choosing correctly, for lack of a better word, and staying authentic?
Hi, Jenny. Nice to see you. Sorry again, everyone. I was late, but as you just heard, I'm innocent in this equation. But thank you for having me again, Jenny. Thanks for arranging this. I really appreciate it. And I do remember that conversation that we had, and I remember your disappointment in it, and I'm sorry, but it goes to the question and answers that we have to start this, which is, as I said, I thought that culture moved past wanting to see slave stories and slave narratives. I believe was what I really said to you. It was not only what I was doing personally, because I said to you, I had reached the mountaintop with 12 years a slave, and I didn't think we can do it better. It was territory that I had visited, and it was a beautiful experience. But I also thought that audiences wanted to move beyond those stories. I believe I said, and that's exactly where this conversation started. And I'll go back to this, a little bit of the same answer, and then I'll speak with specificity. I think you need to put out there what you want the world to look like, and I think you need to put out there what you want people to see. Black people to be represented as, and I think it's really on us to do that, and it's important to do that. And as Black filmmakers, telling authentic stories, it's critical that we do that, and that you do that. And being authentic is a often overused word in Hollywood in the last 18 months, I would say. But there is something to it, and being authentic is, as I said, it's been I don't know, it's been weaponized, it's been used incorrectly in the last year and a half. But there's also something very powerful about it. When it's used the right way and it's taken the right way, there is something about authenticity that is irreplaceable. You can't, it's undeniable. When something is coming from a place of a voice, of an understood voice, telling a story that has to be told, then tell your story. Then tell your story. And it's really hard to find that story, but honestly, never stop. And I've made plenty of movies that weren't that, right? Not everything is that. But as young filmmakers, with an emerging opportunity, it's never been more important, in my opinion, for one to have a POV, for one to have a voice, and to tell your story. And in that authenticity and in that passion, magic is going to happen, and success will follow. All this other conversation, Oscar conversation, theatrical streaming success, it will come from making a great movie. I once worked for people who said, do they know good from bad? And to answer your question, Jenny, the entire shooting match, is it good? Do you know, what are your instincts, right? How do you choose? Is here, man. You're either good at it or not. And if you're pretty good at it, you go to the Hall of Fame. You know, it's like a baseball hitter. Can you hit a fastball? I don't know. Nobody knows, but if you're good at it, you're good at it. So how you choose, if you have good taste, my personal ingredient for it is I try to be as aware of as many things as often as I can be to predict future trends as I can. I intake and absorb more information than I can describe to you. I read for hours a day global news stories. I watch as much as I can watch. I look at trends. I look at culture. I have teenage kids, so I listen to my kids. I watch TikTok. I watch social media. You have so many tools right now to understand, what is relevant and what's important. How you digest that and how you spit that back out creatively, how you see around corners, because it takes us a year to make a movie. It's a year of production to make a movie. It's another year to develop a movie. It's a 3-year process to make a movie. So if you want to get in front of a trend, you have to see around corners that are corners you don't even know you're seeing around yet, right? So it's hard, man. So all I can say is take as much in, speak from your heart, and put out what you want to put out, and then you have the ingredients, maybe, to try to be successful.
Thank you. I think that's a good place to end. Thank you so much, Brad. It's been lovely to talk to you, and thank you for accommodating our time difference. And thank you, everyone, for your contribution, for paying attention, and hopefully you got some nuggets from what Brad was saying. And I suppose that the key takeaway for me is that you have to make what you want the world to look like, and that's our great challenge as filmmakers. We have to go out there and make films that represent what we want the world to look like. Thank you very much, Brad. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great morning, Brad. And yeah, thank you.